And in a change to the advertised programme, we bring you part one of a new drama series, The Importance of Being Eric. My name's Mike Ellis. I have a problem. I rescue, refurbish, restore and revitalise vintage drums, in particular Premier drums. In this programme I'll share with you my adventures, ups and downs, ins and outs, triumphs and tragedies as I lavish some TLC on vintage British drums. Welcome to the Drum Fettler. Every day is a school day with Premier drums, as I've said on many occasions, and after all the years that I've been fiddling and fettling and titivating drums, it still amazes me that something comes up that I did not previously know about. And that very thing has happened with the 10x7 soprano snare. You'll remember it's from the late 90s, and it had a little bit of mottling on the lacquer finish. I was sanding away, minding my own business, being ever so careful to get rid of this mottling effect in readiness for a few new coats of lacquer. And then suddenly, without warning, without so much as a by or leave, this happened. And this, well, it looks like a wrapper. Now, you will note that it has holes that correspond with the holes on the drum. Now, I couldn't believe for 1 minute that part of the lacquering process of Premier in the 90s included wrapping in plastic, so I had to do a bit of investigation. So I had a little chat with Gareth at Highwood Drums, and he reckons that this is when they started doing what he calls UV lacquering or something. It's all very technical, and the important thing is I've forgotten exactly what it is he told me, but it just seems very weird that it's just, look, it's come off like a plastic wrapper, which is very weird. But anyway, the good news is the silver lining on the cloud has exposed a very nice surface underneath, so that is going to get just a little bit of a rub down to get rid of some of the imperfections, and then I can lacquer directly onto that. But who'd have thunked it, eh? Who'd have thunked it? Beware if you are going to do some fettling on your 1990s lacquered Premier, because it might be one of these with the UV sweetie wrapper on it. Amazing. In 1981, much like the rest of British industry and manufacturing, Premier was in trouble. Now this trouble had been caused in no small part by the 1970s, which was filled with strikes, succession of incompetent governments, the winter of discontent, 3-day week, mega inflation, all sorts of things contributed to make life very difficult for them. Not least of which was they'd moved into their new purpose-built factory. They found themselves in the unenviable position of not doing too well, and like many other companies that were falling around and collapsing like climate change activists in a soap factory, Premier had to respond to a great many market forces that were causing changes in the world, not least of which was the influx of Far Eastern companies. Yamaha had set their sights at the top end of the market, Tama also top end of the market, but working their way down to the more affordable side of things. But the biggest impact on Premier's sales and many others must surely have come from Pearl. In the late 70s, Pearl were making what could only be best described as mediocre drums. However, that all changed with the introduction of the Pearl Export, a world-conquering line of drums that lasted many, many, many years and caused all sorts of headaches in drum company boardrooms around the globe. Aside from this, Premier's problems were compounded by Selmer. Now in 1972, Selmer had bought a significant shareholding in the company and had directors on the board. In 1981, they bought Ludwig drums. It stands to reason that they would want out of the Premier deal. It's not difficult to assume or speculate that this also had a very, very serious knock-on effect to Premier. Now, one of the things that has caused great consternation for a lot of the ex-employees at Premier was around the early 80s, their pension fund was plundered by the management and they lost everything when the company collapsed in October 1983. Now I'm wondering, perhaps to get out of the Selmer thing and pay off their shareholding, maybe that's where the pension fund went. Who knows? Something we may never know the truth of. Anyway, with the arrival of the Export and others, Premier had to have a response, and they did. At the end of 1981, they introduced a line of drums called Disco. It's interesting because they didn't seem to last very long, and they have caused quite a lot of head scratching amongst Premier aficionados because there's very little printed material or evidence of their existence, apart from in one edition of the Junior Beat, a newsletter made and sent out to younger members of the drumming community who'd signed up with Premier. It appears that the Disco was also marketed in America as the Senator line, effectively identical drums. The club range, which had replaced Olympic some years earlier, got a bit of a facelift with a new range of finishes, and it was also advertised as moving up market with having single-ended lugs. However, by the end of 1982, the Disco and indeed Senator seems to have disappeared because the Royale range was launched, and as far as I can tell, it's identical to the Disco and the Senator in every way except in name. The Royale, as we know, went on to be quite a success because it spawned the APK, the APK XL, which became the XPK, and the Royale name stayed in use until around 1987, just before the Yamaha merger, but by then was just a budget kit with single-headed drums. A year after the launch of Royale came the launch of the Crown kits. Now Premier would appear not to want to go completely down market. They wanted to keep some quality, so they slipped in this new range, which was basically, well, as Bob Henrik put it in International Musician and Recording World, Royale had had its corners cut in order to achieve a price point, whereas Crown looked like it had had its corners rounded off. So, why the dissertation about all these drums, I hear you ask?
Why the dissertation about all these drums? What's the dissertation?
Well, it's simply to try and add a little clarity to the confusion that can sometimes come with these drums, because cosmetically they all look the same, because they've all got the 1446-20 lug. First of all, it was the Super Olympics, which became the Soundwave range of drums. Now they were closely related because they had the traditional birch shells with the beech reinforcement rings, but by the time Premier came to making a cheaper version, they had to resort to Philippine mahogany for the Royale, and these were painted black inside, and this went through eventually to the XPK and the APKs. Now the crown range was a little bit different because that was the same shell, but it had a birch ply inside the shell, and the natural wood finishes included a birch ply on the outside as well. But as I say, from the untrained eye point of view, they all looked exactly the same, and there was a few small differences, like the spurs on the Royale and the crowns with the disappearing type, whereas Soundwave Super Olympic had the folding type. It can be a bit difficult to tell them apart, and of course throw into mix the rare beasts that are the Disco and Senator lines, well, it can get a little bit confusing. There you have it. That's all there is to it. They all might look the same, but they all are quite different. I'm making progress with the soprano snare. As you can see, we've got a few coats of lacquer on that, and it's looking very, very nice. I'm going to do probably another 3 or 4, but yes, big improvement, so I shall carry on with that, and in the meantime you can take a look at this. Well, the soprano re-lacquering has gone exceptionally well. Really very, very nice finish. I'm very pleased with it. The issue I've got here with doing lacquering is, I mean, it's okay doing a little job like this or a snare drum, but doing a whole kit, completely re-lacquering it, I'm just not geared up. I don't have the skill set, and I certainly don't have the equipment to do it, because to lacquer successfully you've got to have a clean environment, almost like a hospital operating theatre, to keep all the dust out. So what it really means is, whenever I do lacquering like this, I've got to do it first thing in the morning before there's any dust being kicked up anywhere, and then I can't really do anything else in the workshop, because if I spray some lacquer onto a shell and then go off and start sawing bits of wood and filing things, all the air gets filled with bits and they will land on the shell and they will stick to it. Now, in the interests of doing this absolutely spankingly spank on, there is one little aberration just there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sand that down and see if I can hide it, and I'm just checking the rest of the shell, and it's astonishingly good. I've impressed even myself here, and that takes some doing. But apart from that, there's just like a little sort of lumpy bit there, so I'll get that sanded down, and hopefully I'll just be able to do that little bit and then another complete coat of lacquer, maybe 2, and then the job will be finished. I think it is done, it is ready. That little lumpy bit I was telling you about earlier has now gone. In fact, it's gone so well I can't find it now. Yes, I'm very pleased with the way this has turned out. So what I need to do now is get the badge fitted in this here hole. Now then, The badge. Well, this is the badge, and what I'm going to need is some vents, just like these. There's a vent. I'll need to fit it into the badge. Now, I've got a feeling that these are a little bit bigger. These are the new vents, new industry standard vents. They are a bit big. I'm going to need to make the hole a little bit bigger. The other thing I've got to do is I've got to fettle this badge because it's a bit distorted. So I shall get a little hammer out on a little bit of cloth and just tippy tap it back into shape, and then we'll get it put on the shell. So that's the next job for me to do. So I will get on with it instead of talking about it. There we go. So now I've got the right profile on it with my trusty persuader. Lovely stuff. Now then, I need to make the earl bigger so I can get that in. So I think we will do that with a slow drill. Oh, didn't mean for that to happen. There we go, badge, grommet, vent, togetherness. There we go, the badge is in. It is tighter than the proverbial gnat's chuff. That's good. So all I need to do now is get my thing, my splayer outerer. You can also do it with a peen hammer if that's your want, but I have got a special tool where we go and it rolls over the inside of the vent all nice and neatly. So far so good. Nice tight fit for the badge. That's jolly good. Just reassemble the drum now, and then it will be ready for its final little polish, fettle and titivation, and it'll be done. Tremendous. See you in a little while. I'm just cleaning up these little lugs for the soprano snare, and normally I would describe these as the 6200 TT lugs, or if they have the thicker gasket on the bottom, 6200 BD, for it is how they are described in the Premier manuals. But upon having a closer inspection inside the castings, the number cast inside is 6200-20, which is the old way Premier used to do their lugs. Anything with a -20 was a lug. 440-20, 1-20, 2-20, and so on and so forth. So I suppose this must have been one of the last of the original Premier lug designs. As I've said, every day is a school day with Premier, only without the psychotic communist teaching staff. Well, that's the lugs and the hardware all polished up and looking spick and indeed span. So all I need to do now is put it all together. The lugs are all back on, looking more like a drum now. That's great. Put the little tag inside saying what's been going on here at Blenheim Towers for future vintage drum aficionados, so they'll know what's happened to it in the past. Now all I'm going to do now is just give the inside a bijou waftet of lacquer, and that's to seal the wood and also to seal the lug mounts, these screws holding the lugs on, because they were quite badly corroded, as you'll remember, and the lacquer will retard the possibility of any further corrosion going on in the future. Well, hasn't that turned out nice? Another great victory for Blenheim Towers and drum fettlage in general. Could have been a lot worse with all that silliness with the wrap business, that bit of plastic, but from the jaws of potential disaster, we have a successful outcome and hopefully a very happy client who should be coming fairly soon to pick it up, take it home and put it back into his snare drum arsenal. Excellent. Well, that's just about it for this series of the Drum Fettler. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for all your support, your comments, your donations of medication and Vaseline, sweeties and alcohol. I'll be seeing you again soon in the not too distant future, all being well. We'll have some new projects on the way, so until then, fettle on. And in the words of the great Billy Connolly, may I leave you with this sound advice: keep Uranus behind you. A birch inside. We're still working on the blue resonator. No, we're not. I hope we've clarified. I'm quite sure you will remember, in case anybody's wondering, in their own little loving superb. The same, but confusing situation there. Well,